Greetings and welcome to the Petersburg Borough Assembly meeting for May 4th, 2020. I'd like to turn the conference over to Mayor Mark Jensen. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, and you did the introduction for us, so we won't have to go there. And I would like the clerk to call the roll.
Jeff?
Here.
Bob?
Here.
Brandy?
Here.
Chelsea?
Here.
Taylor?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
And Jay?
Here. Okay, before we do the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance, I'd just like to mention that Member Stanton Greger has a previous appointment at 2 o'clock, so he might be leaving the meeting today if it goes that long. Thank you, Jay, for calling in. Like the last meeting, I would like to let people know that are calling in that the number to call in is 800-954-0633. Again, if anybody's listening to this on the radio and you would like to call in and talk under persons to be heard related or unrelated to items on today's agenda, that number is 800-954-0633. And I'd like to just mention to people that are calling in, please be polite. We're addressing the whole assembly. And if your presentation gets rude in any fashion, I'll ask you to refrain. And if the caller doesn't, then we will mute your call. So with that being said, it's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there are no minutes for approval today at the meeting. That brings us to item 4, which is amendment and approval of the meeting agenda today. If there are no proposed amendments, I'd entertain a motion to approve as presented, please.
So moved. Second.
Second. Okay, I believe that was Member Mucci, Member Norheim, and Member Lynn. So all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll move forward to item 5, public hearings. There are no public hearings today. Item 6, which is bid awards. There are no bid awards today either. So that brings us to persons to be heard on items related to today's agenda. So, operator Jennifer, are there any callers in the queue?
Mayor Jensen, this is Clerk Thompson. I see no public callers in the queue. I do know that Department Head Hagerman would like to speak under persons to be heard.
Right. So now would be a good time for Mr. Hagerman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. So I would like to speak on agenda item 15D today. That's a local health mandate number 4. And I just wanted to read my email that I sent to the Assembly last Friday into the record. Excuse me. Mayor Jensen and Assembly, I made comments on the radio today, again this was talking about last Friday, in reference to the face covering mandate which is on the agenda for Monday. And I wanted to follow up to be sure that all Assembly's members receive my comments and understand my position on the topic. I am not recommending that the Assembly extend the current face covering mandate. There are many reasons that I could strongly recommend the opposite and be in favor of an extension of the mandate, including community spread of COVID-19 in Petersburg, masking becoming more commonplace at major stores and airlines, the effectiveness of protecting others when wearing face coverings, CDC guidance for face coverings, etc. However, the community is becoming a place of rapid boilover lately, and the divisiveness between neighbors is seemingly at an all-time want to see is people fighting each other over masking, or in fact goading each other or having close contact arguments over this issue. The backlash is causing a risk for spread that the mandate was designed to eliminate. We don't want to see intentional flaunting of the mandate over a constitutionality argument or any other argument. Further, without an effective system of enforcement, we have likely reached a saturation of who will wear a face covering without some sort of punitive action. And if we go down that road, we will further set off the population and may drive more people to reject the masking due to their objections of our perceived overreach. I would like to see masking in Petersburg, but more so, I would like to see people come together and have common understanding of the risks and threats that COVID-19 represents. Each person make the decision for themselves that wearing a face covering is protective of public health, shows respect for others around you, and to buy into a local situation in a unified way that benefits all of us. The EOC will still strongly recommend face coverings to prevent the spread of the virus, and I also do not recommend that the Borough repeal its universal masking policy for its own employees. We should set an example for others to follow by their own choice. And I also wanted to talk about the various provisions in State Mandate 16, which is designed as the first step of reopening Alaska that the governor's put forward. That mandate has various attachments to it that address types of businesses, so I'm just going to go down a list and talk about the businesses and what the attachment says about masking. Attachment D is for non-essential businesses that are public-facing, but not retail. Says employees must wear face coverings, and in-home services employees and residents must wear face coverings. And attachment E, regarding retail businesses, it says face covering by employees and patrons are a must. Attachment F, restaurants for dine-in service, face coverings must be worn by all employees interacting with the public. Attachment G is for personal care services. Service providers must wear face coverings. Customers must wear face coverings, with exceptions for 5-minute intervals for service being provided. Attachment H is for non-essential, non-public facing businesses. Face coverings must be worn by employees. Attachment I is for child care facilities. Face coverings must be worn by employees. Face coverings are encouraged for older children only. Attachment J, fishing charters. Crew and passengers must wear face coverings. Attachment K, gyms and fitness centers. Employees must wear face coverings. Attachment L, for lodging. Employees must wear face coverings. Attachment M, that covers gatherings. Mixed household gatherings, everyone must wear a face covering. Attachment N is for social, religious, and other gatherings. In the outdoors, face coverings should be worn. Indoors, the face coverings must be worn when possible. And for religious gatherings, face coverings must be worn when possible. All of these stipulations in the mandate carry the common violation language, which could result in a $1,000 fine per violation and a charge of reckless endangerment, a Class A misdemeanor, in which fines can be assessed up to $25,000 per person, or in the case of businesses, $2.5 million fine for violation resulting in a death, and $500,000 for violations not resulting in a death. So there is very, very strong language in the state's reopening plan regarding face coverings. The EOC will continue to emphasize face coverings as being an important factor in mitigating the spread of the virus, and I just wanted to make those comments to the Assembly today.
Thank you, Mr. Hagerman. Clerk Thompson, are there any other callers at this time?
It looks like we do have one caller. Operator, if you could please let Amber Burrell on the line.
Hello, Amber.
Hi.
sorry, they were having some technical difficulties earlier. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time and energy on these issues. I wanted to thank Carl for his input on not encouraging you guys to pass this face mask mandate. I think there was a lot of wrong information and wrong statistics that were used and passed around. You know, last week, scare tactics were used that if we didn't mask up, 2% of the population of Petersburg could need to be hospitalized and it would overwhelm our facility. And those numbers are 5 times that of New York City and the hot spot of the pandemic. So why are we using worst-case scenario numbers and graphs and models and not using actual facts from states that actually never went on lockdown, they never closed down? Montana, for example, has 61 hospitalized residents of a population of 1,052,000 people. That's a 0.005% of their population. And translating to Petersburg, that doesn't even equal 1 person hospitalized. So those are true numbers. Those are actual, factual numbers based on the CDC website and a community that never shut down. They didn't have to worry about laying off employees and hunkering in place and the mental instability of an entire community at this point. The next thing I'd like to chat about or discuss is the upcoming budget. And every single business and family has had to make significant sacrifices over the past 6 weeks. Every type of business and many people have been impacted. And it is my sincere hope that as department heads and assembly members work together on this fiscal year budget, that they sharpen their pencils. And just like every other business owner has to do right now, try to scale back, cut spending, and many members of our community are going to be facing some really hard times over the next couple months, probably years. And please be fiscally responsible and don't let us shoulder that burden as taxpayers. And I think that was all. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Are there any other callers wishing to speak on items related to today's agenda?
There are not, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, well, I assume it might not be for the next topic either, but are there any callers for items unrelated to today's agenda?
I see none, Mayor Jensen.
Okay, like the last meeting, I suppose if it works out, if someone calls later due to some technical difficulty, maybe we could listen to them at that time. I know these meetings are a little more difficult than in person. Excuse me. There are no board, commission, and committee reports. There are no items on the consent agenda. That brings us to item 11, report of other officers. And Petersburg Medical Center CEO Hofstetter, are you on the line, sir?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. You have the floor. You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few things to report. Now I want to just extend a tremendous thank you to our staff for stepping up. We were about 50-plus days where we stood up the Emergency Operations Center for PMC for a COVID response. It's been a monumental challenge for our organization where we've had, as Amber suggested, we just have rapid-fire information coming down from many different organizations where we're following the CDC and the state guidelines. We've tried to stay ahead of those recommendations and tried to get our readiness on top of what the state is doing. We've implemented our staff travel quarantines originally a number of weeks ago before the guidelines came out. We've had temperature screenings, masking. We've isolated our patient care areas. We've had preparation for potential treatment of COVID and also our non-COVID areas in the hospital. We've set up our tent outside for COVID testing and implemented a 24-hour COVID hotline. These are pretty enormous burden to our staff to set up all these within less than a month. We've also sent 20% of our workforce is working at home, and so we've reduced our traffic and pathways, unnecessary traffic into our different areas to make sure people are not cross-contaminating or working in areas they don't necessarily need to go into. Overall, it's been a huge burden to our staff and our organization. Financially, we've seen a reduction of about 50% of our non-urgent clinical appointments. Overall, as a hospital, we're seeing a reduction of about 35% of patient flow. And so in preparation for COVID, it's been very expensive. We have been very aggressive at trying to get federal CARES Act funding, SBA loans, advanced payment from Medicare, advanced payment from Premera. So it's a huge financial toll to our organization. Statewide hospitals are losing about $70 million in revenue a month. I'm advocating heavily at the state and our state hospital organization to try to obtain some of the CARES Act funding. We are even going after some grants. We were able to receive a Rasmussen grant we found out last weekend, which is nice to be able to have some relief in that area. I just want to make a statement about, what does the future look like? It's very difficult, this virus, and the recommendations change so rapidly. I think that having an idea for a plan, even though it can change and scenarios can change rapidly, I feel like planning is a really strong recommendation. I would recommend having a work session with the state epidemiology and Dr. Zink, the medical director. And what we want to do with the borough, if the borough agrees, is a primary interest is the potential different scenarios the virus may present itself and the potential responses the state might ensue. And so maybe we successfully delayed the curve, and maybe it's a seasonal virus until the fall or not. But what are the potentials out there? And having the state experts, state epidemiology and Dr. Zink, I think would be very beneficial to know what those scenarios could be and prepare for those responsibly while we are trying to open up and have an economy. On our side, as far as planning, we are trying constantly to prepare internally for our first admission, which is an extreme challenge. We are also looking at our most complex patients and trying to make sure they're getting their treatment and their medications. We are using creative means to do so, such as video, telehealth calls, and looking at patients that need the most follow-up. Working through some of the processes of the evolving landscape of testing. Testing is sort of a new buzzword, but it has sort of limitations with validity, sensitivity, and making sure that it's an appropriate level of testing for the community. Also of concern, and I think this was touched upon also, is mental health. The cost of mental health to the community is pretty significant. We're working on having an integration of mental health into our primary care. It was a project we were working before COVID. It has absolute same goals and same directives as this COVID response. We have concerns about the impacts of quarantine, substance use, loss of an economy, increased alcohol consumption, and the long-term implications. So those are the things. That's my update. While we're doing all this, we're also still trying to work on a budget for fiscal year 21. And the long-term impacts financially, we don't have a clear idea, but we have a lot of concerns about that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hofstetter. Any assembly members have a question for Mr. Hofstetter?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Mucci.
Yeah, I was wondering if Joe could give us a update on the testing numbers hospital?
Sure. As of today, it was reported we had 158 tests completed. Of those, 139 are negative. There's 16 pending, 3 recovered. Percentage-wise, we tested 4.9% of the population, and our positive of that is 1.8.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I'm referring to the letter that we sent to the federal delegation asking for consistent access to personal protective equipment, as well as increased access to testing so that we could test on a wider scale. Do we have any updates on timelines, or are we still waiting for a federal response there?
Yeah, I can respond to that. We have received 2 state point-of-care tests called the Abbott ID, and those are tests that we can do here locally. The qualifications for those tests are if somebody has symptoms, we can do that test. We also have to validate those, so we have to send the swab into the state to validate the results, but we can do tests. The limitations of that specific test are that if you have a positive, it's a positive, so that's the sensitivity is pretty strong on that side. But if there's a negative, there's a little bit of a maybe a 70% accurate rate on the negatives, and so we want to make sure that any negatives are sent in also for validation. So we have received those tests, and we have about 100 cartridges, I think. Don't quote me on that. But again, limited cartridges, limited supplies, but we have received some of those.
We have just to follow up, no idea when we'd be getting more, because I'm imagining, the dream scenario, right, would be test somebody from every household in town and then test everyone coming in the island, basically, right? And we have no idea when we could get to something like that. That's the thing. We're working with our medical staff and looking at CDC guidelines for where you're talking is asymptomatic testing. And so the concern with that is if you test somebody, and they're not symptomatic the way the disease is, you could have symptoms a few days later. That's not to say that we wouldn't do necessarily some kind of strategy around that, but we have to have a strategy, and that's something that we would want state epidemiology to really guide us on. Instead of just mass testing, does it make sense to do some kind of asymptomatic testing protocol that makes sense? And we're actually working currently in our EOC to look at our medical staff to help develop some of those guidelines. So it's a roundabout answer to your question is that, yes, we're still trying to get cartridges, yes, we're still trying to get supplies, but testing everyone in the community may not be the approach we want. We will look to state epi to help guide us on what kinds of asymptomatic individuals would be most applicable for our strategy for the community. Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, that brings us to a report from SEPA board member Bob Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of things I want to bring the Assembly and folks up on. As you know, we're still trying to replace the submarine cable. We have an RFP on the street right now. We've had a number of folks look at it, a number of contractors look at that. They asked us to extend the time period to June 1 so that they could take a look at it. There is very, very strong concern about what's going to happen with the mandates, the state mandates and so forth. And so the staff is going back and taking a look at that, and they asked folks to bid that a number of different ways, that if they were in effect, if they were not in effect, and what would happen also if we were to delay this till next year. The second thing we was asked, and I believe Tor asked the question, was what would be better off if we just purchased the cable outright so that we had it on hand? And staff has taken a look at that, and they've come up with the fact that no, it's better to be able to put everything into one package, because even though we have the cable, some of the couplings and the connectors and that type of thing probably wouldn't be the same. And so it's better to put it together as all one package. There is concern of whether or not now we can get this done this year with everything else going on. The second item I'd cover is our insurance on that. We have been, it's like our motor pool building. We've now been assigned an adjuster. But our thinking is right now, and from our council is that there'll be no resolution to this till after we're all done, because we still can't tell what the cause of that breakage was. And our estimate right now for that cable and the installation is somewhere between $6 and $8 million. That may have to be out of pocket or some type of bonding. We haven't quite figured all that out yet. The last item that I'm going to cover is we've hit the turn, and by that I mean that we've had now more water coming into the reservoirs than we've have gone out. And this morning, as of this morning, to give you an idea, at Tahi, we're about 1,292 feet of elevation of water. The guide curve that the SEPA board set was 1,260, so we have 30-some feet of water in there, and it's coming in pretty rapidly. On Swan, it's 300 feet, 300 elevation, and we set the guide curve there at 280, so we have 20 feet plus. And still a little bit of Carl's Thunder. We're about 5 feet from spilling on Crystal right now, and we're gaining about 0.3 a day. So from the aspect of having enough water for the summer, looks very good. And with that, I would just have one other point I want to make, is that I don't know if you've looked at it, but we notified GCI that they were overlaying our cables. GCI has now petitioned the state to be able to pull their cable. And so that will be quite helpful for us when we get into that, when we have to pull ours. And with that, I'll just open it for any questions somebody might have.
Are there any questions of Member Lynn about SEPA issues? Okay, thank you, Member Lynn. That brings us to real property tax roll certification. And this is required by Petersburg Municipal Code 4.24.290. Delivery of the assessment roll must occur on or before the first meeting in May. Attached, please find the 2020 total assessed valuation of all real property in the Petersburg Borough. And so, Jody, would you like to give a little explanation, or do you have anything to add to this, Finance Director Tao?
Operator, if you could please unmute Jody Tao, please.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay, great. No, I don't really have anything to add. The assessment values went up 3% overall compared to last year, and this is just a paperwork item that needs to be done every year.
Okay, thank you. So that doesn't require any action, if I remember right?
No.
Okay. All right. That's my thoughts. One clarification. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the mayor's report. To come up on my report here on my screen, and the one that's on here is from last month, so it's pretty much the same thing. Just appreciate the efforts made by the Petersburg residents to protect one another during this COVID-19 issue. A couple things I'd like to add. Member Lynn mentioned GCI cables overlaying ours, and at the next meeting, I'd like to ask the clerk to have a letter of support. SEPA asked for a letter of request to allow GCI to move those cables. When we get back to my notes here. That's on May 18th, we'll address that. I've got an email today sent out from the manager. Dream Cruises has canceled their June visits. I believe there was 3. So that's unfortunate. And that's about all I have for the mayor's report. So I'll turn it over to the manager unless there's any questions. Okay, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Report.
Thank you, sir. At Parks and Rec, we've been scaling back on hours as employees either take leave for the summer, use PTO, unpaid leave with their children, or helping the incident command team and other departments with tasks that they have. At this point, I do not see the facility opening before August at the earliest due to the pandemic. We're also having a lot of discussion around the 4th of July with the Chamber, the IC team, and the Parks and Rec staff on how we want to proceed with that and how can we proceed with that. So a lot of conversation. Welcome for input from folks, and we'll keep talking about it and hopefully make a decision here in the next couple of weeks. The last of the security cameras for the community center have been installed. They will provide full coverage throughout the facility, including the exterior of the building. There's some minor work on network connectivity so that people can see it at their desktops rather than having to go to a monitor, but that should be done here pretty quick. Residents and staff at the manor continue to be healthy. Daily temperatures are taken by staff and residents, and everyone is monitored very closely. We continue to connect residents and family in every way we can, as often as they can, through using FaceTime, texting, etc. Thanks to a donation of a karaoke machine, the residents have absolutely been loving it and are singing their way through COVID-19. As the emergency op manager and operations section chief, most of Sandy's time has been spent on COVID-19 related activities, including meetings, phone calls, staying up with the mandate, and reviewing plans. Just wanted to thank her and the rest of that group that's working on this stuff. She has been reaching out to the local emergency planning committee and other businesses for a status update, but have not received a huge number of responses at this point. She's been participating in electronic fire and EMS drills and doing regular check-ins with the volunteers to keep them up to date and see how they're doing. Ryan has been the guy responsible for reviewing the travel plans for the emergency operations group. He continues to provide online training opportunities to the fire volunteers and is working with Josh to ensure EMS stays current with ever-evolving COVID-19 response. It was reported by the harbor that they continue to have issues with mask compliance in the harbors, and there is concern it will get worse as the season progresses. Harbor will have a meeting with the IC team to discuss and strategize on the issue and how they will handle any transient or tour boats that come in as well. Dispatchers and officers have been fielding a lot of phone calls about the mask mandate, along with answering questions about other mandates for the borough has issued, as well as the state. Officer Pop has been working on videos for the DARE program so students can complete the DARE program while participating in distant learning. Most of Tara's time continues to be taken up with the EOC activities, along with many of the library staff. Chris Weiss has joined the EOC and is now coordinating the mask collection and distribution. If people need masks or like to make or donate masks, call the library at 772-3349 or email eoc@petersburgak.gov. Our new program coordinator at the library, Kari Peterson, has started offering online programs via Zoom, and we have over 450 people are now participating in the library's community reading raffle to support local businesses. The program continues through May 26th. Most of Liz's time is spent working on economic impact grants, discussing federal program with business owners, and updating information on the Borough website and supporting other EOC activities. The federal programs are changing rapidly, and it's a big help to have her provide that resource for folks. Molly is continuing to work on the EOC as the labor pool coordinator. She's been reaching out to local organizations, securing volunteers, and identifying needs for help with the pandemic response here in town. Planning Commission is scheduled to hold a meeting on May 11th The Commission will be considering items that were scheduled for the April meeting. Water and wastewater department and power and light employees are still working staggered schedules to minimize contact with each other while being productive. Power and light crew has dug in 2 5-inch conduits from the back of the substation to a new pole on Ira 2 Street adjacent to the library. This will be the new feed to and from the substation so that the utility can eliminate the hammer slough spans and the rotten poles in the slough and at the power and light parking lot. Wire has been pulled through the conduit at this time. We are waiting on sectionalizing switches to come in before finishing the terminations and swapping over to the new feed to the substation. Lead time on the switch order is about 4 months, and hopefully it won't be much longer than that in consideration of the COVID-19 issues. Thanks to the motor pool for assistance with the procurement of number 71 electrician's truck that was damaged in the August 2019 fire. The used truck is in service, and the staff is very thankful. Lots of thanks to all of the employees of the borough working in difficult situations. They really are doing a great job. The EOC work has made it hard for many department heads to communicate with their staff, but they are rolling with the punches, making good decisions, and keeping the borough safe and operational. Thank you to everyone. Streets crew has been catching up on some ditching along Sandy Beach Road, and spring road maintenance is underway with sand pickup and grading as weather allows. The borough's unleaded fuel pump has been down for a couple of weeks due to the failure of a main circuit board. We have the parts coming and hope to get that pump up and operational soon. 2 light trucks that were expected to arrive in May have now been delayed until September or October due to COVID-19 related production line issues. The budgeted costs for these vehicles are being shifted from the FY20 to the FY21 budget as a result. To reduce potential employee and customer exposure, we are strongly discouraging the use of cash or checks as payment at the bailer until the virus threat abates. Customers are being processed using either credit card or a charge to their account. If a customer has no other payment options, we are still accepting cash or check payment on a case-by-case basis. Thus far, the new policy seems to be working out for everyone. And Chris has been working as the logistics chief for the EOC in addition to his regular role as Public Works Director. Molly from Community Development has started assisting with some of the logistics, which is allowing Chris to start catching up on the regular Public Works business. Karen and Derek are still busy with COVID-19 response duties as well as their normal workload of admin tasks. That's it, unless there's questions.
Are there any questions from the Assembly of the Manager? Okay, hearing none. That brings us to unfinished business today, item 14, and there's ordinances for third and final reading. The first ordinance is an ordinance amending fiscal year 2019/2020 budget to establish a local emergency disaster fund to respond to the COVID-19 outbreak. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on ordinance 2020-10? Clerk, call the roll.
Randy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2020-10 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. That brings us to item B under unfinished business. This is ordinance 2020-11. This is an ordinance that will allow the Borough Finance Director to apply for refinancing of loans for the electric department. And if my numbers are right, that should save us anywhere around $180,000. So I entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion was made by Member Lynn, second by Member Norheim. Any discussion on ordinance 2020-11? I'd just like to thank the finance director for taking advantage of the lower interest rates to if this happens. So, clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that's ordinance 2020-11 passes unanimously in its third and final reading. That brings us to new business. Ordinance this is ordinance 2020-14. This is an ordinance amending chapter 4.24, property tax, to change the payment due date for property taxes. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Hey, can we get, I know what it says on the piece of paper here, but could we get a little explanation about why we're doing this? I mean, I can read this, but for members at home, I might not have a copy of the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, my answer, I think, is for the finance director. This isn't correct, but I think it's to give time for the PFD checks to come out for people to use that money to pay their property taxes. Jody, is that correct? Can you unmute Jody Tao, please, Jennifer?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. We've been thinking about doing this for a few years, and this year seems like a great time to finally do this.
Okay, thank you for doing that and being considerate that way. I appreciate it. Any other discussion on ordinance 2020-14? Let's call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2020-14 passes unanimously in its first reading. The next reading, like all of these new ordinances, the second reading will also have the public hearing for these ordinances at that meeting on the 18th of this month. The next ordinance up for its first reading is 2020-15. This is an ordinance adopting the proposed budget for the fiscal year July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance.
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on ordinance 2020-15?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead.
Okay, Member Stanton.
Thanks. There's a couple of things in the budget I think I'd like to see be tweaked or adjusted right now, but in particular, I think I'd like to see that money be put back into the community service programs. I'm not going to make any amendments on that today. I'll be voting for it in first reading because, as you mentioned, the second reading is also going to be a public hearing, so I want to give the public the next couple of weeks to read through this and then weigh in so that we can better make our decisions at the next meeting. One thing I will say about the meeting, though, the budget, is I really appreciate the forethought of the borough manager and the finance department last year that left us with such a surplus. The planning by the finance department last year is helping us this year a great deal. And I understand that
Jody and Steve have been working on this in a really uncertain time in terms of state and federal monies, and to recognize their efforts of trying to make a workable budget in a nearly impossible situation. So thank you guys very much for your efforts. Thank you, Member Stanton. So are there any other comments on ordinance 2020-15? Is that Member Lynn?
Yes, it's Member Lynn. I'm still studying on it, and I have a couple things. Is that for the public's benefit, is that one of the things this budget does is we've taken savings, and between the budget director and the manager we have not passed any of the school bond debt on in terms of tax, and actually that we reduced the mill rate from last year and this year. So I commend both of them for really following through on this, and I support that 100%. The second thing I'd like to do is that I've been studying the budget, and for the next meeting, I heard the manager's discussion about why we need to add a person to do maintenance. And the more I thought about it when I was leaving, I still don't understand what difference this is making. And I don't want that to be answered right now, and I want to expand that a little bit, is that since fiscal year 18, we've increased the Parks and Rec budget $300,000. And I've had the discussions with the manager. I agree with him 100%. We can't do everything for everybody, and we are going to have to cut back and do some things less. The manager has been looking at this over the last few months. We've significantly increased the Parks and Rec budget for things at the pool, which we needed, no argument there. But at the next meeting, I would very much appreciate a more full discussion from the manager about what he sees needs to be changed, and also a more full explanation on how we're going to do maintenance in these various ways we're doing business. And with that, I'll give up the floor. If we could put that on the next agenda, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Member Lynn. Any other input by other assembly members?
Yeah, I have something to say.
Okay, Member Murrell.
I agree with Member Lynn. I'm having a hard time with the building maintenance program. I don't really think this is the time to add another position. I think that we've thrown a lot of money, like you said, with Parks and Rec and maintenance there. And I think that part of the problem is that there's a lack of oversight in that department. There's not really anybody that supervises. So I'd like to further explanation on that as well come the next meeting.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, I have a few things from a work session on Friday that we talked about using reserves from last year, surplus, I guess. And that was $700,000 if my notes are right. But in this budget, and maybe up to date, we've used $400,000. I don't need an answer for that today, but I would feel like Member Stanton Gregor and Member Lynn have touched on a few things that I'd like to have clarified for me. But I would like to give the public time to look over the budget. I would assume it would be on our website. If I'm wrong, maybe the finance director can correct me on that. And if you have any questions, reach out to the finance director or maybe an assembly member, but I think the finance director or the manager would have the most accurate numbers. And I'd like to see what the public's input is, if there is any, at the public hearing. And then potentially between the second and third reading of this ordinance, if the assembly members still have concerns, maybe we could schedule another work session and have the department heads of the enterprise funds that are in question by any assembly members. We could have a work session as such. So that's my input. Any other comments by other assembly members?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is always a struggle this time of the year with, we hear from people who want to see the budget cut, but this is the time that the community members who have some good ideas to reduce borough spending is to get a hold of the assembly or the city manager or whoever and kind of make those specific requests to see what the budget can look like with maybe cutting the hours at the Parks and Recreation or having this employee not work there, or just this is the time that people need to put their input with specific items, because that really helps the borough, or helps me as a borough assembly member trying to look at some of the suggestions and see if they really work. So I'd encourage the public to get a hold of us. They seem to be able to do that quite easily, so I'm just encouraging folks to kind of speak out and send us a note with some of their ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mucci. Any other comments from assembly members that haven't spoken on this already? Clerk, call the roll. The first reading of ordinance 2020-15 of the adopting the budget for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Mark?
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2020-15 passes unanimously, and its first reading. I would encourage the public to look into the budget, and like Member Mucci said, and a couple other assembly members, give us your input, please. Next item on the agenda under new business is ordinance 2020-16. This is an ordinance amending Title II, Elections of the Petersburg Borough Code to provide for an election by mail at the discretion of the Assembly. And I would entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
So moved.
For second?
Second.
Motion was moved and seconded. Just total clarification. This is not, we will automatically have mail-in elections. It's just that if we still have the social distancing and mandates that would make it hard to have the polling places open, we will have the ability to conduct the election by mail. Any other input? Clerk, call the roll. Oh, go ahead, Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know this applies to the municipal election in October. Do we have any sense of the federal election in November, if something like that is in the works?
Clerk Thompson, can you answer that? Well, my break, right?
I know that the state is working on plans for the state election, and of course the state runs the federal election as well. Nothing has been finalized as far as I know.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Member Tremblay?
Sure did.
Okay, thank you. There's no other discussion. Clerk, call the roll.
Mayor Jensen, before I take roll, if it's all right with you, I did just want to make sure that the Assembly is aware that if we do need to conduct an election by mail, all by mail, it will cost probably more than our normal election costs. And I just wanted to say that out loud. I don't have actual cost estimates I can give you, but I can give you reasons of why it will cost more if you're interested.
Oh, I'm fine, but so is there any way to get a rough idea of a number for our second reading of this ordinance?
Yes, I can work on some estimated costs for you, absolutely.
That might be a good, but I mean, what are our options? Social distancing and hunker down and all that, or, is still in place. I mean, do we have an option?
That's true. I mean, we really don't. We need to hold an election. And another thing that will change if we do go ahead and have a by-mail election is that actually you guys will have to decide sooner rather than later whether we're going to do that. So things may still be up in the air, and you'll have to make a decision, mostly because I will need to order supplies, and things will change. But maybe we can talk about that more in detail at the second reading, and I'll be a little more prepared to give you examples.
That works for me. Any other comments from other assembly members?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Member Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the city clerk, would some of these expenses be eligible for federal funding, since this is kind of part of the COVID issue? That's a question. It's not to get answered today, but I think when we're looking into it, that would be an interesting idea for me if it was eligible for some of that federal funding for the COVID stuff. Thank you.
That's a good question.
If there's no other questions, is there any other input on this ordinance? Clerk, call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes. Ordinance 2020-16 passes unanimously in its first reading. That brings us to item D under new business, Petersburg Borough Public Health Mandate 04 face coverings. I asked the clerk to put this on the agenda because this mandate expires if not addressed by midnight tomorrow, or 11:59 tomorrow evening. So, with that being said, I would entertain a motion to extend the mandate to a certain date. Just putting the motion out there in the positive form. I guess there's many ways you can address it, but that's how I put it out there. So, discussion. I need a motion first. Motion. Is there a motion? Seeing no motion to extend the face covering, this fails. So the mandate 04 will expire at 11:59 tomorrow. Am I not hearing somebody trying to speak? I guess not. So that brings us to the next item on the agenda. Letter of support for financial relief to the United States Postal Service. I'd entertain a motion to send this letter.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And Assembly Member Mucci requests the Assembly consider a letter to Senators Murkowski and Sullivan and Congressman Young in support of financial relief to the U.S. Postal Service. Of course, you can go online and see what the letter says. It's just requesting funding for the Postal Service in their due to the COVID issue, there's a lack of funding. So anyway, any other discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Member Mucci. What was the source of the letter? Where did it come from?
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was just a draft letter that I didn't really get it from anywhere. I asked Debbie to help me put together some kind of verbiage to let our congressional delegation know how important the U.S. Postal Service is to this community, who is pretty darn isolated. So that's where I got it. Thank you.
Mayor Jensen?
Member Lynn, you have a follow-up?
Thank you.
Mayor Jensen, this is Clerk Thompson. I just wanted to interject and say that the letter was drafted 99% by our federal lobbyists.
Oh, okay, that's good clarification. So the numbers, I would assume, are quite accurate then, as the approval of the loan and with minimum restrictions or intrusions up to $10 billion loan from the Department of Treasury. That's in the letter, and Postal Board of Governors has indicated that additional funding of $75 billion split equally among emergency funding, more borrowing authority, and investment in a modernized fleet and other infrastructure is necessary for the Postal Service to maintain financial viability through this decade. So it might not only be in relationship to COVID, but just the Postal Service's health, I would guess. So, any other input?
Mr. Mayor?
Through the chair.
Member Tremblay, then Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you. I believe some of the context for this is that if there is not federal action taken by June, that there will be, in fact, a sort of a shutdown of the federal post office. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Member Mucci, but I believe that's why the main reason for the urgency of this letter is. So I'm grateful to Member Mucci for putting it together.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to apologize to Debbie. I didn't mean to throw her under the bus here. I think we realize how important the post office is in this small community, and quite honestly, it wasn't me who did all the legwork on this. I just wanted to thank the city clerk for doing most of the heavy lifting here. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Mucci, and thank you, Clerk Thompson. Any other discussion on the letter to our federal delegation? Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we will send a letter regarding the Postal Service to our federal delegation. That brings us to item 19, or 16 rather, excuse me. Court communications. There are many communications in regards to the local mandates that we have passed. Over the last few meetings, they're all listed on this agenda, and I believe you can find them on the Borough website. And there's way too many to go through and read. Excuse me. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Any other communications people have to report? Okay, that brings us to assembly discussion items. I asked for this next discussion to be put on the agenda. A request that Clerk Thompson wrote a draft, I guess, for cell phone use during public meetings. The policy, since the meeting policy is attached. If the Assembly desires, the policy could be considered by the Assembly as an action item in the May 17th meeting. I had a conversation with the attorney about this, and she said certain use of cell phones during public meetings can be considered violating the Open Meetings Act. So I just thought it would be good to discuss. Maybe we could get the attorney to give us an explanation of her points of view if we feel it's necessary. But I just wanted to get this out there. Seems like over the last month or two during meetings when we're doing electronically, there's been people, family members that and I've received texts, but I didn't respond, and emails during the meeting. So I just don't think that it's proper unless it's an emergency. So, any other input on this? Okay. Well, maybe we'll have the clerk draft something up. Okay. Any other discussion items?
Mr. Mayor, just 1 second.
Okay, Member Mucci.
Sir, when you say have the clerk draft something up, what are we talking here? Are we talking about an ordinance, or what are we thinking here?
Well, we should. I don't think we have, and correct me, Clerk Thompson, if I'm wrong, anything in regards to cell phone use. There is one section underneath Petersburg Municipal Code 3.08-150B. All the remarks from persons desiring to address the Borough Assembly during a public meeting shall be addressed to the Assembly as a body and not to any individual Assembly member. So that could be, that is in our code. So if one Assembly member is getting input from a member of the community during a meeting and they use that to base their vote on that information, and the other Assembly members don't have that information, and we're not working off the same information to make our vote. So there's the opportunity provided during every public meeting for the public participation where the Assembly may be addressed as a body. So I just, in this day and age of electronic communication, either we don't use our cell phones or we have a policy in the code that says we can't. So I don't know how far we want to go, but I've had this conversation, like I said before, with the attorney, just trying to get her take on it, and there are some issues with it. So that's all, Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if we wanted to put an ordinance together, or maybe just the opinion of the attorney, see how she reads it, and then if we do need to go further with putting an ordinance together, then maybe that would be the second step. But okay, thanks.
That sounds good to me. So if the other Assembly members are in favor of that, maybe we could ask the attorney to give us, her opinion in an email form, so we all have the same information.
I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, back. Oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering, would this be just something where, we just, leave our cell phones at the door with Debbie for the meeting so that they're just not there, or what was the idea? Just don't answer the text.
Maybe just turn them off. I know if you go to the Senate chambers, the Senate Finance meetings in particular, and if your phone goes off, there's a $5 fine. It's more of an embarrassment thing than anything else. Anyway, just trying to be as open to the public as we can, so everybody's working with the same information. That's all. If there's no other discussion items, in particular, that brings us to Assembly member comments. Any Assembly members have comments they'd like to put forward at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do.
Member Lynn.
The situation we're in now, I don't think is going to end anytime soon, maybe the rest of the year. And thinking about our meetings and what we've done for meeting policies, I think it's time we take a look at thinking that we're going to have this in place, but also trying to see how we can, let's say, social distance and meet in a location. And it seems to me that our meeting chambers are such that if folks could move around that room and just have the manager and the clerk in the room with everybody else calling in, you could possibly meet in there, in that chamber. I think that it's time we take a look at how we can get business done maybe a little bit more efficiently. And with that, I'll give it up to see where everybody else is at.
I could agree with that.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Did we lose Mark?
Oh, there you are. Okay, Member Mucci, sorry about that. I had the mute on.
That's okay. I think it'd be a little difficult to have an assembly meeting in the assembly chambers and not let the public in to participate. I agree with Member Lynn that this is a little clunky, and the discussion is really, it takes a lot of effort to get a discussion put together. But I think if we were going to start meeting in the assembly chambers, then I would have a difficult time not letting the public in as well. I think, if that's what Member Lynn is looking for as a way for us to get together, I think the public is going to want access as well. So I think that should be part of the conversation as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Member Mucci and Member Norheim, for your input. Any other Assembly members want to have any comments under Assembly member comments?
Mr. Mayor? Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead, Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we going to have a report from the borough's incident commander today?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so I guess my question is, can somebody explain to me where we are with the processor's plan for bringing employees to town? Have we finalized that, or where are we in that discussion? Thank you.
Mr. Griesbeck, do you want to answer that since you're the liaison to those entities?
I would be happy to, and if Carl is still on the line, he can jump in too. So we've been working very closely with Icicle and Trident in particular towards their plans and how they are going to handle their employees. The plans are being reviewed by the medical PMC, particularly Dr. Tasillo, and as changes happen to it, they're making modifications to their plan, sending it back to the state, and getting approval on those. So for the two big ones, we're feeling really good about how that's going. We've had a little harder time with working with Tonka, but they're a lot smaller too. They're not really bringing in that many people. So they're on my schedule to call tomorrow, and we're also trying to set up a meeting with Phil and Mark Tasillo and the Icicle staff for later this week to just kind of dot I's and cross T's and make sure that everybody's on the same page. But again, so far so good. In particular, Icicle is going to use a closed campus environment, so their employees, even after they've been here for 14 days, are not going to leave the Icicle facilities and try to limit their interaction with people who are in town. So I think all of it's a pretty good plan so far.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Griesbeck, for that explanation. And Steve, I've got a question, and I'm going to interject again. So I would assume when the state approves the plans for our local processors, the DOC looks over it, and they approve it, and they'll be public document, correct?
That's a really good question, Mayor, and I'm not sure. The state's guidelines were actually not necessarily to share it with us. These are our local processors have been voluntarily doing that. Once we get our hands on it, it does become a public document. So I'm hesitating to answer you until I double check with Carl.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, well, yeah.
Thank you. This is Carl. I just want to add to Steve's celebration. That is a very good question. We've gotten mixed answers from the state on that. They at first said that they would provide them to us, and then they said, well, we need to get a legal opinion on whether or not we should. So we're still waiting for a legal review to be done on the part of the state to know if we are going to share them with us. But the good news here is that both Trident and Icicle have been very open with sharing their plans. They are both very invested in making a good plan and have both used the term living document as far as their plan goes, meaning that it can be adjusted to meet any changing criteria, any more restrictions that come down the line from the state, and they're all in. They're really working hard to protect their workforce and also the community. As far as getting those plans out to the community, sharing them at this point, because they're sharing them with us voluntarily, we should probably consult with the companies themselves and make sure there isn't an issue there. But the fact that they're living documents and will be subject to ongoing modifications and changes, that it might be problematic as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hagerman. Member Mucci, does that kind of answer the question we were asked about?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
That makes the question. Any other member comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Or, sorry, Jake can go first.
Pardon me?
I said Jay can go first. He's very quiet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jake. Member Sandberger.
Touch on
Member Stanton Gregor, you are really fading out.
Any better now?
A little, but not much.
Yeah, I'll pass then. Never mind.
There, got you that time, Jay.
One more time, Member Sandberger.
Better?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thanks. No, just as Carl mentioned earlier, I want to really encourage everyone to go to the state's website or the Borough website and pay close attention to mandates that come down from the state, and as our local masking mandate expires, just encouraging everyone to wear one anyway when you go to the store and be in close proximity to people. We have a good opportunity to keep mitigating cases here in Petersburg, and I think as long as we stay on it and vigilant about this, we'll come out the other side all right. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Stanton Gregor. Any other Assembly member comments?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Basically the same thing. The mandate is going to lapse tomorrow. I still think you should wear a mask, even if you don't want to, but that will be your choice. Kind of. You need to, again, read what's going on from the state there. And also, just for, grumblings I see and hear about Carl trying to, control everybody, I don't believe that's true for a second. He's been doing nothing that we did not task him to do. This was the responsibility that we gave him to do. So, if you got any problems with the way things have been running, you need to direct them at the Assembly, not Carl or the emergency council there. They're doing what we told them to do, and I think that's an important thing for just everybody to know. That they're not the bad guys. I mean, if anybody's a bad guy, it's us, but, we're not doing anything that we don't think is in anybody's best interest, as you just saw. Nobody even touched the face coverings mandate because, it was in the best interest for it to fail.
I have a comment, if you're done, Assembly Member Norheim.
Yeah, sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, just on the note of the coverings mandate, I honestly laughed when the state rules came out after our special meeting because so much of it made our work with that local state almost unnecessary. Right now, people are wanting things to go back to quote-unquote normal, but if you want a business to be open, you need to be wearing a face covering as you participate in that business, basically. There are a few exceptions, but I encourage people to read through those details. For us as a public face business, you have to wear a face, unless you have a medical condition or you're under the age of 2, face coverings are universally applied, and so that is what being open for business right now looks like, and I would just ask that people respect the safety of the employees that they are, of the businesses that they patronize by following those recommendations, and, roll your own eyes all you want, but I just hope that people do it while covering their face with a facial covering, and I'm grateful for everyone who has participated in the public dialogue. I just hope it continues to be productive.
Okay, thank you. Any other Assembly member comments? I just have one that I forgot to mention under the mayor's report. I will be the first meeting in June. will be my last meeting until later this summer. I'm not going to have 16 trips that I could call in. I'm going to let the assembly and the clerk call to put that on the calendar. That being said, if there's no other assembly member comments, it's time for recognitions. Any recognitions by staff or assembly members? Member Norheim?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, today is a very special day for me. It is International Star Wars Day, and may the 4th be with you all.
Okay, any other recognitions?
I have a recognition.
Member Assembly, and then Member Michi.
Yeah, I just want to recognize that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. It started in 1949, and I was able to call in last week to the SHARE Coalition, and so I want to recognize everyone who is doing work for the community there. They've been doing really amazing collaborative prevention work, substance abuse, domestic violence prevention work. And as we talk about the effects of COVID-19 and how it's having all these subsequent effects on our community, I'm so heartened to see the collaboration happening between these amazing organizations in town, as well as, along with the EOC, many borough members were also on that phone call. And so if people are feeling compelled to try to meet the challenges of this moment, just know that the EOC is working with these groups to try to find ways to help and support each other. And so whether you just have an hour a week or whether you just have ways to volunteer from the safety of your home, you can volunteer, and they are looking for bodies and for assistance. And so that's EOC at petersburgak.gov. You can be from there brought to the Shared Coalition members who are doing really, really amazing, important work. And so part of Mental Health Awareness Month for me is a more intentional gratitude practice, telling people how much they mean to me. And so this is my deep, heartfelt moment of gratitude to the Shared Coalition, as well as the EOC for all the work that everyone is doing to really meet the mental health, child care, physical and safety health, substance abuse prevention, housing, and food security. The list goes on, and there's really an army of people trying to meet that need. And if you feel urgent worry about these moments, they are looking for people to help. So email the EOC, and you can get in touch with them. And so grateful for everyone on this call as well for all of the work you're doing.
Member Michi, you've had a recognition?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to recognize the incident command teams on both the borough and the hospital. Phil and Carl are in a tough spot. Like Member Norheim said, they just kind of fell into that, and we're relying on them to do a tough job. Erin Michael at the public health nurse is giving us some great information. I appreciate all she's doing. And like Member Norheim said, if people have a problem with what's going on with the incident command team, they need to kind of let us know what's going on, because I'm pretty sure we can set them straight. So I just wanted to say thanks a lot to Carl and Phil for all their leadership during this real weird time. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Michi. Any other recognitions? Yes, Member Steinberger.
Thanks. Just briefly, I want to thank Chelsea for bringing up Mental Health Awareness Month, and as a reminder for all of us in town, how we view the situation we're in, and we're all experiencing it differently in our own ways, but I just want to encourage everyone to keep being patient and empathetic with one another. We're all humans, we're all living this at the same time, and I think we're all deserving of mutual respect from one another and kindness and empathy. So keep it up, Petersburg. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Member Steinberger. Any other recognition? Okay, before I ask for a motion to go into executive session, I'd just like to remind everyone that executive sessions are for the assembly, people that are going to speak on the issue at hand. I would imagine it might be the finance director, the clerk, or the manager, but us at home as assembly members are we should be on the phone with no one else nearby. This is confidential information. So with that being said, I would, and one other little note for the public, we are going to be calling into a different number, so this won't be broadcast on the radio, obviously, and we won't come back to the open session, but we will not be taking any action from our discussion in executive session about the budget process. We're just going to talk with the manager and the team that's working on the, not budget, but on the PMEA contract. So, with that being said, I guess we may as well adjourn from this regular session if that makes sense to everybody in the court, and then we'll call in to the other number and wait till we all get connected.
That makes complete sense, Mayor Jensen. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everybody. Let's hang up and will everybody have the other number, I would assume?
Yes.
And it comes with a code too to access it. So all right, we'll see you on the other line here.
Thank you.
Thank you.